Thank you. My legs don't work as well as they used to, so it takes me a moment to get up. Hey, I live in California, and I've been in all 50 states, but Wisconsin is my favorite. From May to October. All right? And by the way, this place is packed. Is this the way it usually is, or just a bunch of you come to church today because you heard your pastor's gone? What's the deal here? Just check it on that. I've been making the case that Christianity is true for 50 years. And when I say true, I mean true in the way gravity is true, true to the world, not just true for me. And we'll get into that detail in just a moment. But during that time, I realized that there's actually a lot of ways that you can show that Christianity is false. And you probably didn't expect me to say that. But look, our story starts in the beginning, God, right? What if there's no God? No story. We're followers of Jesus. He's central to our whole project. But what if Jesus never lived? No project. What if there's no soul? A lot of people don't believe in a soul. If there's no soul, there's nothing that survives the death of your body. There's nothing to go to heaven or to hell. No Christianity. Paul said, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, we're idiots. You ought to feel sorry for us. I mean, that's kind of a paraphrase, but that's his point in 1 Corinthians 15. So there's a lot of ways that people have attempted, and in legitimate ways, I would say, to show that Christianity is false. So I don't think any of those go through. But there is another way that I want to talk about this morning that is deadly to Christianity if it succeeds. And I want to introduce it by telling you about an experience I had at a chiropractor's office, okay, which I think they should call him a chiropractor. So I was there getting prepped for a treatment, whatever. I'm laying down the helper before the doctor came in. Helper was setting me up and everything, and I like to ask people questions about spiritual things to get their opinions, and maybe that's an avenue to converse about something more significant. And so I asked her about morality. I wanted to get her view of the moral project, basically. So I asked her, do you think that morality is objective or absolute in some sense, or do you think it's just relative, kind of up to the individual? And she said to me, what do you mean by morality? And I thought, well, this is not a good start. So I will give her, I'm thinking, a clear case example, like who's buried in Grant's tomb, by the way. That would be Grant, by the way. I know this is the first service, and some people are still waking up a little bit. So I said, is murder wrong? And she hesitated, and she's thinking about it. And I realized that I haven't given her a clear enough clear case example. So I said, okay, how about this? Is it okay to torture babies for fun? Long pause. I said, what's up? She said, well, I'm thinking. And I'm thinking, what's to think about? I said, what I want to know is whether you think it is ever morally acceptable to torture a child just for the pleasure that it brought to you. Long pause. Finally, she said, I think people should be allowed to decide for themselves. I'm not making this up. And by the way, this is not the first time I've had this conversation. Now, I imagine if this young lady had been awakened in the middle of the night by the screams next door of a child being tormented by that child's parents, her moral intuition, her moral common sense would have risen to the surface, and she would have called the police. But notice that in a conversation where she's got to kind of think through it, she could not bring herself to judge torturing babies for fun as an objective moral harm. So what's going on here? I'll tell you what's going on. It's the power of an idea that has infected our culture. And this idea is called moral relativism. Now, that might be a new phrase to a lot of people here, but you are completely familiar with the concept. So let me spell this out a little bit because I want to make a contrast between moral relativism and moral objectivism. I want you to think about ice cream and insulin. Ice cream and insulin. When you choose a dessert, you choose what you like. You may have one preference, somebody may have a different flavor preference. It doesn't matter. There are no right or wrong answers there. It's up to the individual, all right? You with me so far? When you choose a medicine, you don't get to choose what you like. You have to choose what works for the objective circumstance. Notice in the first case, ice cream, that's on the inside. Whatever you feel on the inside, that's all that matters. When it comes to insulin, it's what the medicine can do on the outside to an external, real, objective problem. Now, the objective problem may be your health, but that's part of your body, that's part of the actual world out here. It's not part of your feelings. And if you decide, well, I'm not going to take insulin for my diabetes, I'm going to take ice cream for my diabetes because I like that better, well, you can see there's going to be a problem. This is the distinction between relativistic morality and objective morality. If a person is a relativist, and massive portions of our culture talk this way, when it comes to moral claims, things that are right or wrong, all right, vice or virtue kind of thing, when it comes to those kind of claims, it's just simply a matter of individual preference. The way you probably hear about it is, well, this is my truth. You may have a different truth. Abortion's a great example. Abortion may be right for you, but it's not right for me. Actually, usually it'll be voiced in the opposite. It may be wrong for you, but it's not wrong for me. So it's the pro-abortionist playing the relativist card in this particular case. Notice that the conversation like that is not really about abortion. It's just like the conversation about ice cream is not really about ice cream. It's about our personal preferences, what we like or we don't like, and that's what makes it true for us. Okay, when you get to the insulin side, there isn't a true for us. It's true to the nature of the world. You don't get to have your own, your own math. It's like gravity. Gravity is a feature of the world, right? If you stop believing in gravity, you're not going to float away. Just saying. Because it's objective reality. It's not dependent on you. And so I'm contrasting these two groups right now, these two views. The view on this side, not you guys, I'm just saying. What I'm characterizing as relativism is when it is up to you. And on that view, morality is in that category. It's just a matter of personal preference. And for people who believe in objective morality, it's not personal preference. Morality is like gravity. It's a real feature of the world. Some will use the word absolute because it's over everybody and governs everybody, whether they like it or not, or whether they believe in it or not. It's a feature of the world. It's outside of us, not inside of us. It's not an ice cream kind of thing. It's an insulin kind of thing. Now, in our culture, of course, people think of morality and also religious claims in the ice cream category. They don't think of it as an insulin kind of thing. And this is why when you make your claim as a follower of Jesus about objective moral principles, some things are right, some things are wrong, and also objective religious truth, if you will, that Jesus is the Messiah. God come down, Emmanuel, God with us. He's the rescuer. He is the rescuer for the world. And it's not just our truth, it is the truth. Now we have to defend that claim. I get that. But that is the claim of Jesus and the text, that Jesus is that. Then people get upset and they think, well, that's judgmental. That's intolerant. That's bigoted. That's narrow-minded. And notice that there are all kinds of ways that the culture pushes back on Christians to silence them on these kinds of claims or to shame them. Now, I haven't really taken up the issue regarding whether relativism or objectivism is true or not. I'm just trying to make clear the differences. but I think you've got a pretty good idea here of the difference between the two. So here's what I want to do from this point on. Oh, by the way, I mentioned as I started different ways to prove that Christianity is false. This is one of them. If it turns out that relativists are right, we're in trouble. Because we as Christians are followers of Jesus. Jesus is the what? Starts with an S. Savior. Good. What does he save us from? Also starts with an S. Sin. All right, what is sin? Isn't sin a violation of a moral code? An objective, absolute moral code that makes us guilty? And this is why we need to be rescued from the guilt of our own sin. But what if it turns out that moral relativism is true? If moral relativism is true, there's none of this stuff. It's just individual opinion. You're not violating any law of the universe when you do whatever it is that you want to do. There's no sin in relativism. And if there's no sin, there's no need for a Savior. And if there's no need for a Savior, there's no need for Jesus. At least Jesus is insulin. A lot of people who are relativists like Jesus, but Jesus is their ice cream. That's all he is. He's their flavor. They like this guy, but he's not the rescuer. So you can see how important this issue is. What I want to do is I want to explore what I'm going to call the myth of neutrality and what's attached to it, the myth of tolerance. Notice that relativism kind of demands of us a neutrality with regards to morality and other people. You have your view, they have their view. We're neutral to each other. We don't judge each other. Therefore, we tolerate each other. I think neutrality is a myth when it comes to morality, and I want to show you that. And if it's a myth, then the tolerance that rests upon this neutrality is also a myth. And I think that's true also. I'm going to show you how to respond when somebody calls you intolerant, and there's a little exchange with questions, a tactical maneuver that will help you show what's going on here in that kind of exchange, help the other person see that this is not going to get them anywhere productive. And then I want to make an argument against relativism. I think relativism is false, and we can actually know it. And then I want to show how that all connects to Jesus. So first thing, I want to expose the myth of moral neutrality. I want to read something to you here that was actually written by Faye Waddleton. I don't know if the name is familiar to any of you. She was the former president of Planned Parenthood years ago. You can imagine I probably disagree with her on a number of things, but I'm not reading this to ridicule her. I'm reading it because it's a very clear and well-written characterization of an idea that I want to critique. In fact, this is so well written, I think you're going to hear it as I read through it, and you're going to think, I don't think I'm supposed to agree with her, but I don't know how I could disagree without sounding foolish. It's that well done, but there's a flaw in it. And as I read it, maybe you'll catch it. So here's what she says, open quote. Like most parents, I think that a sense of moral responsibility is one of the greatest gifts I can give my child. But teaching morality doesn't mean imposing my values on others. It means sharing wisdom, giving wisdom for believing as I do, and then trusting others to think and judge for themselves. My parents' morals were deeply rooted in religious conviction, but tempered by tolerance. There's our word. The essence of which is respect for other people's views. They taught me that reasonable people may differ on moral issues and that fundamental respect for others is morality of the highest order. I have devoted my career, she writes, to ensuring a world in which my daughter Felicia can inherit that legacy. I hope the tolerance and respect I show her as a parent is reinforced by the work she sees me doing every day, fighting for the right of all individuals to make their own moral decisions about childbearing. Of course, she's talking about abortion on demand there. 75 years ago, Margaret Sanger founded Planned Parenthood to liberate individuals from the mighty engines of repression. As she wrote, the men and women of America are demanding that they be allowed to mold their lives not at the arbitrary command of church or state, but as their conscience and their judgment may dictate. And then she closes. I'm proud to continue that struggle to defend the rights of all people to their own beliefs. When others try to inflict their views on me, my daughter, or anyone else, that's not morality. It's tyranny, it's unfair, and it's un-American, close quote. Wow, that's good writing. That's powerful. It's persuasive. It sounds so sensible. It sounds so reasonable. It sounds so tolerant. But there's a fundamental flaw. First, let's see what her basic view of morality is. As her view of morality, as she's expressed it here, do you think this is more of an insulin kind of view or an ice cream kind of view? What do you think? Nobody's responding. It's an ice cream kind of rude, just saying. Okay, because you can see what she says here. Americans are demanding that they be allowed to mold their lives as their conscience and judgment may dictate. She wants to trust others to think and judge for themselves. Okay, so she's relativistic, promoting a moral neutrality and non-interference. And if you interfere and you're not morally neutral, then you're not tolerant. That's the way it works out here, all right? Not neutral, not tolerant. Okay, what's the flaw? Faye Waddleton is not neutral. In fact, she has very strong words for those people who disagree with her on these major issues, all right? She wants to continue to defend the rights of all people to their own beliefs, she writes, but then has this to say of those whose beliefs on morality are different from hers: they are unfair, they are un-American, and they are tyrannous. You realize that those are moral judgments there. For example, does Faye Waddleton show the same respect for a person following her conscience, her words, by blocking an abortion clinic? No, she thinks that's wrong, and it should be illegal. In fact, it is now illegal. And not only, it's illegal because she's not only got her own views that she thinks are morally right and people who disagree are morally wrong, objectively wrong, but at the same time, she will force her views on other people. How do I know this? She said it. Remember this? I have devoted my career to ensuring a world in which my daughter Felicia can inherit that legacy. What legacy? Her point of view. And how does she do that? She's a lobbyist, or she was, Capitol Hill, passing laws. In other words, it's as if she was saying, I've devoted my career to ensuring a world in which my point of view is enforced. And when Congress passed a law making it a federal offense to block an abortion clinic, Pamela Moraldo, who followed her as president, had this to say. I heard it on the radio. Here's her exact words. Think of this. This law goes to show that no one can force their viewpoint on someone else. Okay, those of you who are chuckling, get it. All laws force a viewpoint. That's the point of the law. Now, please understand, I am not complaining about them doing this. This is the American way. Everybody gets a voice, everybody gets a vote. Some people get two. California, they get 3 or 4. I don't know what. My point is simply this: it's not neutral. I'm not making a case even about abortion. I'm just using this as an example. People who claim neutrality that aren't neutral. And the fact is, this is true of every single person that weighs in some fashion on any issue. They are weighing in on the issue, explaining what they think is right for everybody, not just for them, because if it was just for them, they wouldn't be talking about it. There is no neutrality. And by the way, if there's no neutrality of the sort I'm talking about, then when it comes to tolerance, there is no tolerance either, if tolerance depends on neutrality. And I want to demonstrate this to you by offering you a little tactic that you can use. I did some teaching yesterday all day long, and we had a fabulous time with a fabulous group of people. It was wonderful for me. And one of the things I did was teach them some tactics. They wrote a book called Tactics, a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions. And one of those is the ability to use questions in very particular ways to disarm another person. So in this particular case, let's say you are called intolerant for the views that you hold, whatever they happen to be. This has happened to me lots of times. Whenever somebody ever calls you a name, you always ask a particular question. And the general question is, what do you mean by that? So if somebody called me, well, intolerant, you're intolerant. I said, well, why would you call me intolerant? That's kind of what do you mean by that? Why would you call me intolerant? Well, you think you're right. You think you're right and everybody else is wrong. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think if I weigh in on an idea that I think that I'm actually right? Yes. If I didn't believe that what I believed was right, I wouldn't believe what I believe. I would believe something else and think that was right. That's the way that thing works. But here's the postscript, just like everybody else. Everybody thinks their views are right. No, they may not know they're right, but if they believe them, that means they think their belief is true. And that includes the other person who's putting me down for being intolerant because I think I'm right. Okay, so that's the way the conversation starts. Well, you think you're right when I ask that first question. So my response is, well, I do. I could be wrong. I'm okay with that. I'm willing to talk about it. Here's what I have a question for you. Do you think you're right in the views you're offering here? Your opposition to me, right? Do you think you're correct? What's he going to say? No, I'm wrong in all my views, man. Of course he thinks he's right. Now he might do the little postmodern two-step, the relativistic two-step and say, well, my views are true for me. Okay, then why are you talking to me right now? The reason he's talking to me is because he didn't just think his views are true for him. His views are ought to be true. I ought to believe what he believes. That's why he's upbraiding me and calling me names. Now that point is a real important one because that's all that's going on here. We both think we're right, but only the Christian is being called names and berated for thinking is right. This happens all the time. Now, I know it's happened to some of you. You haven't seen what's going on. So I have a follow-up question. My follow-up question is, why is it when I think I'm right, I'm intolerant, but when you think you're right, you're just right? Is that a fair question? I'll tell you, twice I've got the same answer. The person said, the reason that you're intolerant when you think you're right, but I'm not intolerant when I think I'm right is because I'm actually right. You see the problem here? This is just simple name calling. That's all it is. We're not talking about the issue anymore. They're trying to shame me and shut me up by calling me a name. And this is a little technique to help that person see that. What if he said, you're intolerant, and I said, you're ugly? No, I wouldn't do that because it's impolite, right? And it's also irrelevant because can ugly people be right on some things? Don't you wish? It doesn't matter whether you're ugly or intolerant. It has no influence on the view you hold, whether it's true or false. This is just a distraction. It's called an ad hominem to the man. It's just simple name calling. So I want you to see that. Now, I want to make an argument here against relativism, against the idea that there are no moral absolutes. And it's actually somewhat simple to do because I'm trading on the notion that nobody believes relativism, even if they say they do. Nobody believes relativism. And I know this because they betray it. They betray their deeper convictions with their language. If relativism is true, no language used in an objective sense about morality is meaningful. Yet people use that kind of language all the time. And there's a reason why they do this. And I got this idea from Francis Schaeffer. His point was the world is God's world. And human beings are made in the image of God. And therefore, since they're made in the image of God, they can't stop being image bearers because they're built-in things in virtue of being an image bearer. And one of them is morality. The world is thick with morality, and human beings have the faculty to see it, not with the eyes, but with I'm just going to call it a moral intuition. That is the ability, that an intuition the way I'm using it. I don't mean female intuition. I believe in that, ladies. I mean something that you didn't learn, something that is built into you. There are rational intuitions. If I said A equal B and B equals C, you know that A what? So one mathematician, A equals C, right? Transitive property here. Well, how do we know that? If I say, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore, the mathematician again, Socrates is mortal. You all know that. Everybody gets that one right. How do you know that? Oh, I learned it in philosophy class. No, you didn't. You didn't have to take a class to see that those first two statements, if they're true, that the third one follows from it. Now, what enables you to see that is a rational intuition. So we have rational intuitions that helps us function in life. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't function at all. God gave us that. It's built in. We also have moral intuitions. I referred to moral common sense a few moments ago. So that's part of the package. And I'm going to appeal to that because it's our moral common sense, our deep-seated moral intuitions that informs our language about things. And we are using moral terminology all the time to describe things and discuss things. And if it turns out that morality is not objective the way we're talking about it, implicitly, then our words are meaningless. And if our words aren't meaningless, if the words we're using to describe things morally are in fact sound, then moral relativism is false. Now that's the way this works. I think I'll start giving you some examples and it'll become more clear to you, all right? I call these relativism's fatal flaws. I wrote a book with Frank Beckwith on this called Relativism, easy to remember. Feet Firmly Planted in Midair is the subtitle. And there are 7 that I listed. There are actually more, but I'm only going to give you about 3, and you'll get the idea of how this works. And the first one is key to all the rest because it follows, all the rest follow the same pattern. There's one thing that everybody in the world knows, no matter where they live or when they lived. They know that something is wrong with the world. That's the problem of evil. That's why people, universally raise the challenge, especially in religious conversations about the existence of God. What about all the evil? And by the way, they don't stop there. They add a phrase. What about all the evil in the world? Think about that. They are not saying, what about all the evil? What about all the things I don't like that happen in life? They're asking about what about the evil in the world? Not the ice cream stuff. The influence stuff is what the nature of the question is. Because it would be rather silly if a person said, I can't believe in God. Why not? Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts, what's the deal? They're disgusting. Which I happen to agree with that. And I cannot imagine why on every menu on the West Coast, and I even noticed, even here in Wisconsin's infected with this, there's Brussels sprouts. Nevertheless, if I said I can't believe in God because he created something so disgusting to my taste, well, it'd be kind of a frivolous complaint. I can't believe in God because he made something I don't like. But that would be the objection to God based on evil if relativism is true. No, when people object against evil, they are not objecting in a relativistic way, even when they say they're relativists. They're objecting to the evil in the world. But I just want you to see this. There can't be any evil in the world if relativism is true. That would be like saying you've broken a universal speed limit in a universe that has no speed limits. You know what the Autobahn is, right? It's that highway there in Germany. Can you break the speed limit on the Autobahn? No, you can't. Why not? No speed limits. I've actually driven on the Autobahn in a rental. You can't break a speed limit where there are no speed limits. You can't break laws that don't exist. Relativists say moral laws don't exist. Therefore, there can't be any broken laws. Therefore, there can't be any evil. And this one is substantial, obviously, because this issue comes up so much. But if relativism is true, there is no evil in the world. But you have to decide for yourself, based on your own moral instincts, your own observations, are there any things that happen in the world that you can describe as unethical, corrupt, dishonest, crooked, cruel, wrong, wicked, evil? If there is, then relativism is just false. If relativism is true, there is no evil in the world. But there is evil in the world, therefore relativism is false. Got that? Now the second fatal flaw is very similar. That second fatal flaw is that if you're a relativist, you cannot, Did I say something bad? No, okay. He who remains until the end shall be saved. I'm just saying. Where was I? If relativism is true, then nothing is evil, therefore nothing is right or wrong either. We're in the habit of telling people that they just did things that were wrong, whether they're friends that need to be told that, or whether parents are telling their kids and whatever. Or we look in the culture and we see things that happen. No, that's not right. Well, wait a minute. If you're a relativist, aren't you? Weren't we talking about that? How could that not be right if relativism is true? Why do these things come out of people's mouths? Because they know better. Even though they're protecting themselves with their philosophical view of relativism, so no judgment can come against them, they still know when other people do things that are wrong. But there can't be anything wrong that anybody ever does if relativism is true. I mean, look, it's fall now. Some of you guys, whoever, may go out and throw a football around. Let's throw the football around. You want to play a game? No, we're not going to play a game. No rules. We're just gonna toss the ball around. After a couple of passes, somebody yells, "Illegal forward pass." How could that be? There are no rules to this game. Out of bounds. There's not even any boundaries. There's not even a forward. But that's what happens when people who are relativists, who essentially claim there is no objective morality, are identifying wrongdoing in other people. Now, if it just seems, you got to ask yourself the question that there's some things people do that it's okay to say, that's not right. You should not do that. However it is, whatever it is, well then, relativism is false. That's the second fatal flaw. Here's the third fatal flaw, and there's a bunch of them, but I'm just giving you a sampling here. If relativism is true, there is no justice. The word justice is meaningless because the word justice suggests how we ought, moral term, how we ought to treat people under certain circumstances. A lot of talk about justice now, and a lot of that talk about justice is coming from relativists. Help me out here. Help me understand, why is there an obligation for justice if morals, there's no objective morality? Explain that to me. This is what I want to ask. And by the way, human rights are just, as in justice, just claims to things. They're not just claims to things. In other words, all rights are based on a justice issue. We ought to treat human beings in a particular way because human beings are unique. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that each is endowed by his creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. So that's right in our declaration. It's foundational to us, and we all understand that. That's why human rights are so important to us. Yet, if relativism is true, there is no foundation for human rights. Now, those are three serious flaws, and I could give you more. I'm running out of time here a little bit, so I want to give you some tactics to employ this. The relativism, basically the sum of all these flaws, is the kind of world that we would be living in if relativism were true, would be a world in which nothing is wrong and nothing is right. Nothing is bad, nothing is good, nothing is blameworthy, nothing is praiseworthy. None of those words mean anything if relativism is true. There's no evil, no justice, no rights, and no tolerance, because the obligation for tolerance is offered as a moral obligation. You ought to be tolerant. There can be no moral oughts in relativism. So the best way to show that this is false is just to use it against the same person who's offering it. Somebody says to you, you shouldn't push your morality on me. All you have to do is say, why not? Now what? Because it's wrong? You can't say it's wrong. They don't believe in that. Okay? I had in the same place, physical therapy place that I told you about earlier, the chiropractor, Gilbert was one of their PTs, and he was helping me out once, and he's not a Christian, but we were talking about Christianity. And so Gilbert, he asked me what I thought of homosexuality. It was a very friendly conversation. That's the way I like it. And I told him, quite frankly. And then he says, you Christians are like really nice people most of the time, but then you start getting judgmental. Now, he had made a mistake. He hadn't realized it yet, but he's going to find out in a minute. Some of you maybe caught it. But I wanted to draw him out a little bit more. So I said, after he says Christians get judgmental, I said, what's wrong with that? And he said, well, it's wrong to judge. Okay, some of you are catching it now. So I said, well, Gil, notice I'm using questions here now. If it's wrong to judge, then why are you judging me right now? Now you see it? He had never heard anything like that before. So he drops back a few feet and he's scratching his chin and he's trying to figure out what just happened. And finally he says, well, I guess I was judging. I guess it's okay to judge. That's what he said. But, he said, but it's wrong to push your morality on other people. That's when you cross the line. So now I have another question, a clarification question for him. What you just told me, Gil, that it's wrong to push your morality on other people, is that your own morality? Which, of course, it was, because that's why he's expressing it. Just wanted to get clear with another question. He said, yes, the poor guy, he didn't know, he didn't see the hole he was about to fall into, right? And so I said, well, then why are you pushing your morality on me right now? So he's back in the corner rubbing his chin again. He makes a couple of false starts. He can't get going. And finally he says, it's not fair. I said, why is it not fair? He said, I can't find a way to say it which it sounds right. He thought I was playing a word trick on him. I said, Gil, it's not a trick. You are doing the very thing that you're telling me not to do. Your point of view is self-refuting, okay? And I've had conversations like this lots of times with people in the past. And sometimes they'll say, now you got me all confused. And I say, no, you were confused when you started. You just now figured that out. Now, I gave this lecture much more robust than this sermon, but it was the same material at the University of California at Berkeley, also known as Berkeley. And it was a huge gallery, bigger than this, filled to the brim, and there were overflow rooms. I had a great opportunity, but this is more of a philosophical discussion, and I've advanced degrees in philosophy. It was appropriate that I start with that. But I did point out, after the defeat of moral relativism, then some form of moral objectivism must be true. In other words, there are moral rules that govern us, but it's worse than that. We know we don't keep those rules, and we feel inside bad about that. And so I asked the audience, what is the word that we use to describe the feeling we have when we look down inside of ourselves and we see the badness that's there? There's a word in English we have. What is that word? And then I went silent. I waited, and then I heard it from the audience. Guilt, guilt, guilt. Yeah, we all feel guilty. Here's my question I asked them. Why? Why do we feel guilty? Well, maybe culture causes guilt. Okay, we can talk about that. But how about this? Maybe we feel guilty because we are guilty. Is that in the running? And the answer I told them to guilt is not denial. That's relativism. The answer, I said, to guilt is forgiveness. And this, I said, is where Jesus comes in. And that was the first time in that whole evening there at overflow crowd at Berkeley that I mentioned anything religious. God, Jesus, anything. The very first time. What was I doing? I was plowing, making a way for this seed to be planted. And let God do what he wanted to from there. You see, we know that morality is objective. We know it. It comes out of our mouth all the time. All you have to do is listen for it. And if you're in conversation with somebody who claims to be a moral relativist, that may be true for you, but not for me, blah, blah, blah. And there are some things that are kind of like that. There are ice cream kinds of things, but the relativist, everything's ice cream. Everything's ice cream. They can't bring themselves to condemn even the most obvious historical examples of evil, except the Christian who thinks he's right. And then there's just, volumes of judgment that pour out. And you can ask them about that. You're a relativist, right? How does that work? Use your questions to do that. But ultimately, what this shows is that there is a law and we don't keep it. That means we're guilty. And we're not guilty before the law. We are guilty before the one who made the law. We are guilty before God. And that's the bad news. But God has made a provision for rescue. And the rescue is full and complete. And that rescue is through Jesus of Nazareth, and only through Jesus of Nazareth, because he is the only one who solved the problem. He is Emmanuel, God with us. God came down to be with us and to do for us what no one else could do, rescue us. And he rescued us by paying the punishment that was due us. He took it on himself so that we could take on his goodness. If you want a fancy theological term, that's called justification. He made him who knew no sin to be sin in our behalf, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. And that is the rescue. And it is the only rescue for fallen, broken people, and it is the only hope for this world. Thank you. Father, that applause is for you. Jesus, that applause is for you. The wonderful plan of rescue that you, Father, ordained and that you, Jesus, fulfilled on our behalf. I pray that anyone here who has not resolved this with you would bend his knee, if just in his heart, right now, later today, sometime soon, or bend her knee, beat their breast, say, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. Lord, have mercy on me. And get up and come away justified based on your promise and follow you and never stop for Christ's sake. Amen. Now, before I step down, I want to explain something about the organization I represent very quickly, because for many of you, this is the first exposure to anybody from Stand to Reason. We don't want that to be the case. We want this an extended relationship, actually. We would love to have you be part of our community, and that's what these cards are for. They were placed on the seats around you when you came in. If you want to grab one of these are really one per family, okay? One per family. Or if you're a single individual, well, you're a single individual family, that's okay. And there's a perforation. I want to tell you what this is for. There's a perforation there in the middle. I want you to bend at the perforation, tear it off. And this little card is a thumbnail sketch of a question-asking routine that you can employ, and I modeled that up here in a couple of my instances, that will help you navigate more safely and more effectively in conversations. So this is for you. It's based on the Tactics book. This one's for me. This is where you tell me who you are and where you live and what your email address is. And what we will do is we're going to send you complimentary training material from Stand to Reason every month. On every other month, you're going to get an article that I write or one of our team members writes, about 3,500 words. And by the way, it's called Solid Ground, and every single chapter in virtually all of my books came from originally from a solid ground. So this is a way for you to get the good stuff at no charge early on. Okay, we want to send that to you. We also want to, on alternating months, send you a shorter piece, just one page. It's called a mentoring letter, and it will give you some information that will help you navigate the culture more effectively. But we need to know where to send it, and that's what this card is for. Now, if you take this and fill this out, now or afterwards, go outside. There's a table out there where you can drop those cards off. I'm going to give you something today. That's our first piece of training, basically. We have a little red booklet that's titled Jesus the Only Way, 100 Verses, in which I chronicle 100 verses in the New Testament that teach Jesus is the only way. 9 lines of argument. Well, I don't have those with me, but I am going to give you a quick study thing that has all 9 lines of argument, all the major verses, to secure you in the biblical claim that Jesus is the only way of salvation. This isn't for sale. It's not a freebie either, so it's not just there for everybody to take. It's for you if you turn in the card with your name on it, and we will then give this in return, all right? So that's going to be out in the counter in the back. It's pretty self-explanatory. I just want to say thank you for having me here in my last week of the summer in the wonderful state of Wisconsin. Thanks.